Let us begin our service now with the prelude for ingathering. And we will listen to this prelude played live now from our sanctuary by James Smith. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, James. Welcome to our community worship with the UUs of Charlottesville. We're glad to welcome all of you to this virtual sanctuary, old friends and new. My name is Debbie Norton, and I am serving as the worship weaver. Today, I am grateful for the tech wizardry of Sean Scally, Julia Landis, and Carolyn Hines, who are working behind the scenes as technical support. We're also grateful to the video editor, Ellie Ransom, for her gifts and contributions to our worship today. To offer us a greeting from our Board of Trustees, we invite Breck Gastinger to join us.
Hi, everybody. Want to welcome you heartily on behalf of the Board of Trustees. Some of you might know me as a worship weaver, but today I am wearing my board hat as a member at large. But I also want to bring gratitude today for the gifts that I've received from this congregation by serving on various committees, task forces, and the board itself. Yes, these are gifts that not from the sanctuary, but from meeting rooms and Zoom meetings and tasks that require agendas and minutes. And I don't know if you've considered serving or thinking about working for the congregation in this way. I know that some of you might do this in your professional lives, and the last thing you want to do is like sign up for more meetings. But I say this very sincerely, that I am deeply grateful for the spiritual experiences of serving in this way with many of you. It can be transformational to tackle real problems, difficult questions, and to do so while living our values of mutual respect, deep listening, justice, and love. It's truly inspiring, and it has helped me grow as a professional and as a person, and I hope you might consider it sometime. A hearty good morning and welcome to all. Thank you for being here.
Today, our worship is a very special time to learn of a project near and dear to our own Frank Dukes. Frank is a longtime member at UU Seville, and he is also the Distinguished Institute Fellow at the UVA Institute for Engagement and Negotiation. We are so looking forward to hearing from him and the colleagues he has invited to join us today. Detisa Gathers, co-chair of Descendants of the Enslaved Communities at the University of Virginia, and Colleen Yates, the treasurer of that group. As a call to worship, hear these words from Reverend Marta Valentine. We come together today to honor the universal community. We call into our presence this hour our ancestors, whose love, labor, and commitment made it possible for us to be here now. Let us call one another to the table of abundance, and let us open to this moment with hearts that have no borders. We come from many places, descended from many ancestors, and now let us worship together, singing this song as we see images of Charlottesville African American ancestors.
Living in the fire, go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the fire, living in the fire, go back to the fire, turn the world around. Whoa, so is life, ah, so is life. Whoa, so is life, ah, so is life. We come from the water, living in the water, go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water, go back to the water, turn the world around. Whoa, so is life, ah, so is life. Whoa, so is life, ah, so is life. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain, go back to the mountain, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain, go back to the mountain, turn the world around. Whoa, so is life, ah, so is life. Whoa, so is life, ah, so is life. Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See, we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See, we one another clearly. Do you know who we are? See, you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See, we one another clearly. Do you know who we are? Whoa, so is life a party wow. So is life. Whoa, so is life a party wow. So is life. Water make the river, river wash the mountain. Fire make the sunlight turn the world around. Heart is of the river, body is the mountain. Spirit is the sunlight, turn the world around. We are of the Spirit, truly of the Spirit. Only can the Spirit turn the world around. Whoa, so is life a party round. Ha! So is life. Whoa, so is life a party round. Ha! So is life. Whoa, so is life a party round. Ha! So is life. Whoa, so is life a party round. Ha! So is life.
Oh, we are the Little Goodwill family. I'm Liam.
I'm Chris.
I'm Nora.
I'm Tori.
I'm Kieran. We've been coming to this church for about 2 years, and what we love about it most is how kind and welcoming the people are and the values it is teaching us.
We light our chops this morning, the symbol of our UU faith.
We gather this hour as people of faith,
with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
We light this chalice
to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. This is a church of the open mind. This is a church of the helping hands. This is a church of the loving hearts.
Our congregation's chalice has been lit and will have its own screen throughout the service. If you have a chalice at your home, please light it now.
Thank you, Goodlow Little family, for that. And thanks, Scott, for that music. And welcome, everybody. I suspect that most of us by now have at least heard of the University of Virginia's Memorial to Enslaved Labor, even if you haven't had a chance to go by and take a look at it. But most of us probably are not aware that there's an active group of descendants of the enslaved in this area, whose work includes memorialization, but goes well beyond that as well. And we're honored today to be joined by two officers of that group, descendants of the enslaved communities at the University of Virginia, Colleen Yates and Detisa Gathers. So we'll first hear some snippets of a video made by Charlottesville Inside Out that describes the search for the descendants, how to identify those descendants, and a little about the memorial. And then we'll hear from Colleen and Detisa. We'll hear then some beautiful music, and then I'll offer a homily after that as well. So first we hear the video.
My goal is to get as many or find as many descendants of the enslaved laborers from my list as I can. What UVA did, which is fascinating, was take a look at the ledger books, which means this is where money would have been paid to hire.
Right.
And so, yes, so all the enslaved laborers were rented to the university to conduct their jobs.
Designing the memorial was very interesting because all the elements that people sit down and said they wanted to see, and having the design team actually put those into building the memorial and actually seeing what it was going to look like was really interesting and a lot of fun.
Dr. Murphy just recently informed me that I'm a descendant of enslaved laborers at the University of Virginia on the Maupin side of my family. So for someone to come to me and to have completed some research that I have not seen before is shocking, and it's exciting, and it really rejuvenates me and makes me want to go find out more.
I'm descendant from the Hughes line and from the Hemmings line from Monticello. Whenever you walk through an area that you know your family and your ancestors have been previously, it sort of takes on a new meaning before when you didn't know. You look at things a lot differently. You're always wondering, what were they doing? What were they seeing?
So we're first going to hear from Colleen Yates, who has many roles in the community besides the one we introduced earlier as an officer of the descendants of the enslaved communities at University of Virginia. She is on the community design, the community engagement committee for the Memorial to Enslaved Laborers. So, and many other roles too. So Colleen, please, let's hear from you.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Colleen Mary Yates II, and I'm Sally Hemmings' 7th generation great niece. One of the things, the questions that Frank had for me was, how has Monticello sort of changed my life in a way? And, what does it feel like to finally know that your ancestors were there? The one thing that I am most grateful for to Jefferson was the keeping of his records and his farm book. Because of the records that Jefferson kept, not only myself, but our huge enslaved community and ancestors, we basically know a lot more than the general population of the U.S. who are trying to find their ancestors. So with that, I am grateful. It starts and it paints a picture, and it lets us know some of the information about what went on. My great-great-grandfather, who was Wormley Hughes, he dug the pond, or what they call the holding pond, and that's just outside the back door of Monticello. And that's the pond where when they were fishing, they would put the live fish in there until the cooks were ready to cook it. So it was first called a holding pond. He also dug Jefferson's grave when Jefferson passed away. He was also allowed to come into Charlottesville unaccompanied because he was trusted so much. So he would bring a buckboard and the horses in and get flour and get sugar and this type of thing. From the records that were kept, I'm assuming that everyone knows what Mulberry Row is, but just in case you don't know what Mulberry Row is the slave row that was just to the south side of Monticello. And that is sort of the African-American community there condensed into one row. There were shops, there were the weaver shops and other shops that the Blacks supported and worked in for Jefferson. So Mulberry Row is a huge part of African American life. With the studies that have gone on at Monticello, they were reconstructing Mulberry Row. My great aunt and uncle, and when I say great, we usually don't line all seven of them when we're talking to people, but my great aunt and uncle, that would have been John and Priscilla Hemmings. Their cabin was the first cabin that was restored on Mulberry Row. So if you get a chance to go up and look at the cabins that have been restored, my aunt and uncle's cabin was the first cabin that was restored. It's a great feeling to now go up there and look at everything that is changing. When we were in school and we went there and they sort of drug us at school kids, they drug us almost every year. And not knowing that your ancestors or your family came from that area or sprung from the slaves, it's a different feeling once you find out. So I am grateful for the records. It helps us in tying everyone together, and you get to learn more about what went on. And I guess the biggest takeaway is that I would like for America to learn that slavery was not pretty. It was disgusting. It was despicable, and it was physically hardening on almost everyone that it touched. When you are at the on campus at the University of Virginia, when you are at Monticello, and when you're almost everywhere else in the United States, basically a slave tilled that soil, built those buildings, worked day and night on those grounds. So we at the Descendants of the enslaved laborers, we just like you to appreciate and realize what slavery means to you in your life, even if you think it doesn't. Almost everything you touch and look at was touched or built by a slave. And the University of Virginia, I'm sure Jefferson didn't lift near a brick to build the university. That was all built by slaves. So when you're on campus and you're looking, I hope you have a newfound respect for our ancestors. And I hope you get to see the memorial if you haven't seen it. And thank you for inviting me this morning.
And good morning. My name is Detisa Brown Gathers, and I am on the Memorial to Enslaved Laborers Community Engagement Committee, along with Frank and Colleen, which is where we all kind of met up. And this work began long before I even knew what I was even doing. Sorry, my internet connection. I hope you can hear me okay. I see my internet connection is in and out. But my work started some time ago, before I even knew what I was doing. I was invited to have a dinner with Otto, and while we were in the community engagement part, and I don't even think I was a part of that yet. Carolyn Dillard invited me to the group, but I had the opportunity from the onset to sit down with the designers and see that this memorial was coming. I didn't know what it meant to me at that time. And as it started developing and I started sitting in the meetings and started realizing what was happening, and then I was continuing and working and following my own ancestry, I realized, wait a minute, this is about me. This is about people like me. And I was so shocked that the images that showed, it was an older lady in the chair and the man there. I've learned that that was my ancestors. I learned that that was Peggy Raglan Brown Fortune. Brown Spears. I got too many names in my head, but Peggy Raglan Brown Spears. And that was my great grandmother. So it made me dig a little deeper and try to figure it out. And unlike Colleen over at Monticello, she had good records, mine are not. It's very hard and sad that it's difficult to find that information. It wasn't recorded well. Just like the Memorial to Enslaved Laborers, it has room for 4,000 slots. 4,000 that were enslaved at UVA. Only approximately 500 names, a little over 500 names are represented there. Some are first names. Some are just their occupations. and very few have a first and a last name. That hits my heart deeply. We were not known. We were not important enough to keep those records. With that being said, being on the Memorial to Slave Laborers Community Engagement Committee, it became important to continue the work in some kind of way, because you can't just put this memorial up and not make the connections. How do you not find the community? How do you not keep reaching out to the young people? How do you not keep allowing people to find and know who they are? So it became important to, with the help of Shelley, she found this group of individuals, and we formed together, and we end up making sure that we made a community and an area for people to continue that work. So we have been growing. We have created a nonprofit, and we decided to do a 501(c)(3). We have it as of December. We learned that we are 501(c) approved, and we're now working on our launch to be able to accept the community, to continue to learn about this, but as well to continue to follow our research. We're so honored to have this, and I'll put the website in the chat. I apologize, I muted myself. But I also wanted to share just a little bit about my history and why this is also important to me. I passed and grew up here in Charlottesville, graduating from Charlottesville High. And I graduated with advanced diploma. But however, I did not connect to history. It didn't make sense to me. And I can say that I now have brought up my two sons through school. They're now 29 and 23. And then as well, they are of this community. They came through Charlottesville High as well. And now so hard. And I knew, so it's important for me to make sure I take that to their ancestors and also trying to help them understand where they came from and how to unite in this world. I see my connection is unstable again. I apologize. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Good, okay. So I just wanted to, I see my connection's unstable, but I wanted to give you all and let you all know that it's important for us to keep these connections going. It's important for us to keep learning about this history. And as well, like I said, I want to go back to a story. My internet is throwing me off. But as a kid living around, my grandfather became of age. And you know, as you come of age, they have a little dementia and different things. So we would put a bell, a Christmas ornament on the door so that it will ring and let us know that my grandfather was leaving the home. Well, my grandfather would leave and we couldn't find him for a while. And my mother would tell me, call to the ER, University ER. And I would call. I didn't understand what I was doing. And they would tell me, yes, Mr. Rhodes is sitting here. And I turned to my mother and said, he's there. What's going on? She said he went home. See, where the ER is sitting right now, that used to be Gospel Hill. That's where my grandfather grew up. He was going back home to what he remembered in his space, what that was familiar to him, that is no more. So as your family is aging as well, remember that they're just sometimes going back to what's familiar to them. And I just wanted to give you just that little piece to just let you know that it's important to know who you are, to know why situations are happening. And I'm doing all I can to create the space so that the rest of the community can continue to grow and continue to learn who they are. So I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for having me, and I hope you can hear me through my internet issues. Talk to you all soon. Thank you.
We heard you very well, Detisa. Thank you, Colleen and Detisa, very much for your presence here. Now we will have the hymn, We Are.
For each child that's born, the morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, the morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our mother's race, and we are our grandfather's dreaming. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the spirit of God. We are mothers of earth and mothers of time. We are daughters of God and sons of creation. We're sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We're lovers of life and givers of nations. Speakers of truth and keepers of faith. Makers of kings and wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreams. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of God and sons of creation. Sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We're makers of kings and wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the spirit of God. Each child that's born, the morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, the morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
Thank you again, Scott and the choir, and thank you again also Detisa and Colleen for your contributions to the community at large, and then especially for our service today. So this homily is called Descendants Rising, and you all might now be assuming that I'm referring only to the descendants of the enslaved communities. It would be a natural assumption, but it would be wrong. I would like to invite each of us to envision ourselves in our roles as descendants ourselves. And just as Detisa and Colleen and others can imagine an ongoing relationship between themselves and those ancestors, a relationship characterized by an obligation to live up to their dreams and their struggles and their resilience, we all can do the same. The challenges of doing so for those of us who are white are of course very different than for Detisa and Colleen and others. And I'm not speaking of the difficulty of tracing one's ancestry, although for many people descended from enslaved, it can be difficult or impossible to do so. I'm speaking of the challenges that come when one understands and acknowledges this reality. For those of us who are white, so many parts of our ancestors' lives and our own have been shaped for the better at the expense of a whole group of people whose lives have been shaped for the worse. Let me say that again. For those of us who are white, so many parts of the lives of our ancestors and ourselves have been shaped for the better at the expense of a whole group of people whose lives have been shaped for the worse. There are many ways this has happened, and I know a lot of you know are very aware of that, but let me just speak of one example that's personal to me. My father son of a career military officer, also became a career military officer. And in 1965, he was assigned to Northern Virginia. To our delight, we brought a brand new home in a cul-de-sac with a basement, a separate family room and living rooms, and a lawn. It was quite a different experience for a family that had lived in an apartment for the last 4 years. So 16 or 17 years after that, they sold the house when they retired. The house had appreciated 4 or 5 times its previous worth. They moved to Lake Monticello, bought about the same size house for much less money. And that initial investment in that Northern Virginia home became the basis for our family wealth and eventual inheritance for myself and my siblings, and allowing us to do the same, investing in our homes. So far, there may not be anything particularly striking about that story, but let me contrast that with another story about another officer of the same rank and therefore pay as my father. Just a couple years after our move, this officer also moved with his family to Northern Virginia. The homes that this officer were shown were not the same as my family were shown. They were shown in different neighborhoods. And this officer paid about the same price for his home as my parents paid. But when they sold their home after about the same amount of time, they were able to do so about half the price that my parents got. I'm sure you figured out by now that the other officer was Black, my father was white, and my family was shown housing in a quote unquote good, meaning all white neighborhood, and the Black officer was shunted into other neighborhoods. I heard that story about 10 years ago, and it personalized to me what I had known but had not really understood in the same way. And as I look around at our beautiful community here in Central Virginia, I can see story after story of how this sort of institutionalized racism has played itself out and continues to play itself out in so many ways. How in the neighborhood just outside of the University Hospital, the infant mortality rate average is consistently 3 times as high for African Americans as it is for others. About how a few years ago, our metropolitan region had the worst racial disparity in terms of interest rates charged for mortgages in the whole country. About the New York Times feature story in 2018 of the disparities in gifted education and advanced placement classes in Charlottesville schools. About the stories that Jordy Yeager has uncovered about Charlottesville housing covenants that protected whiteness and disadvantaged Blackness. About stories told to me by Black employees at the University of Virginia who did the same work as white employees, but were not hired full-time, even though they were working the same number of hours, did not have benefits, and therefore they had to work longer in their careers even because they couldn't retire because they didn't have the same benefits. And we can go on and on. But I want us to actually think about descendants in yet another way. Descendants rising, meaning the generations yet to come. To me, my obligation to our descendants is clear. We owe our own descendants a different community. We owe our descendants the opportunity to tell a different story. We owe them a story that says that we began an honest telling of this history and that we paid attention to the lingering harms from that history. We want a story that says that we began the efforts to calculate these harms, past and present. And most importantly, we identified together what repair would look like. Repair for past harms and repair for the current ongoing racial disparities that we have. And some of us are acting on that story right now. For over 2 years, we've been thinking about how to develop a Truth and Transformation Commission for the Charlottesville, Albemarle, and Central Virginia area. This multiracial group has determined that we need to look at structural racism. We've also determined that, yes, we'll look at specific incidents, such as the lynching of John Henry James in 1898, the erection of the Confederate statues in the early 1900s, the closing of the schools in 1958, the destruction of Vinegar Hill in the 1960s, and the events of August 11th and 12th, 2017. But we'll use those events as windows into the deeper structural problems that racism and white supremacy have brought us. This group of people has named reparations as one of our goals. And we also acknowledge that healing is a goal, but healing can only happen when all the wounds are identified and the causes of those wounds halted. We have to look at all our institutions, the University of Virginia, where I work, the city, the county, surrounding jurisdictions, our local governments, yes, but also our places of worship, our neighborhood homeowner associations, our businesses, our public spaces. Provide this honest accounting of our history and do the work of repair. This obligation to our own descendants, of course, is not easy. We've already seen the pushback from white nationalists, August 2017 in our own community, and as recently as January 6th at the Capitol. White supremacy has managed to sustain itself over multiple generations, but we can do this. And not only can we do this, we can do so in a way that affirms our values, that deepens our relationships with each other, with groups such as the Descendants of the enslaved communities at UVA, that builds beloved community with Tatisa and Colleen and so many others, and to do so amongst ourselves as well. May it be so.
Thank you to Frank and to Tatisa and to Colleen. We join now in a moment to give thanks, to remember, and to center within, as well as to be able to reach out to one another. Spirit of life and love, be with us now as we give thanks for being descendants of those who worked and loved and struggled to keep life and love alive. May we be worthy of the inheritance to know the harm and the hope of our ancestors, and to do all we can to spread the joy and reduce suffering in our world today and for our descendants. Our prayers this morning are with those across the South, especially in Texas, as they struggle to survive power and water outages, flooding and disruption of critical supply chains for food and water. And our concern includes communities of color, poor communities, and fence line communities in Texas that suffered the worst and longest impacts whenever there are devastating climate crises. And all of this during this pandemic. We light this candle. This is a flame to offer warmth. Together, as we are held by the music, may we know that we're also held by the love of those who care. Amen.
Thank you, James. One of the ways we live up to the lives that got us to this moment is to support one another in our community with compassion, understanding, and a fire of commitment to justice. We can respond to the inspiration from the stories we have heard today by sharing financial gifts that help make this work together possible. Once a month, we invite you also to give to one of the partners in our larger community who are working to make our lives better. This month of February, we invite your gifts to support the Blue Ridge Abortion Fund.
Hi, I am Susan Evers, and I am a member of the Board of Directors of the Blue Ridge Abortion Fund. I've been involved with the organization since 2019 because I wanted to be able to support people who make a decision but can't go through with that decision unless they have the financial support. It's astounding when you hear a call from someone saying, I can either do this, or I can pay my rent, or I can feed my children. So it's such a relief that we can go ahead and help this person so they can move on in the life that they choose. I'm so grateful that organizations such as yours are willing to come forward and help us do that boots on the ground work. Because bottom line is, we all have the right to make our own choice, and we all have the right to complete that choice. Thank you so much for what you've done in the past. Thank you so much for all you continue to do.
Thank you, Susan. We give thanks for all the ways we can care for others, and we encourage you to be generous in putting your love into action with your gifts to UUCville and to BRAF. May your donation, like your love, go out into the world. You can send a check in the mail, make an online donation to uucharlottesville.org using Breeze, or you can text using this text link. For Blue Ridge Abortion Fund, text SOCACT to 434-277-2266. Otherwise, text GIVE UUC to 434-277-2266. Please join me in dedicating the offering now, saying these words. We accept your gifts with gratitude. May we use them wisely for the highest good.
Thank you, Debbie, and thank you, everyone. As we prepare to close this time of community worship, may we give each other encouragement and the reminder that we are in this long journey together. It's a journey to beloved community, and it didn't begin with us, and it won't be achieved by us, but it needs us to be along. It's a journey we have joined, continued from our ancestors, and carried on into the future by our descendants. Not all of us can physically walk or run the race. Some of us have to be helped. Some of us move in different ways than others, but all of us can move forward in our lives towards the goal of beloved community. This hymn, which we're going to sing together now, is actually a prayer that our progress needs to be guided, and that our hands held together will help us all. The song comes from an old traditional spiritual, from the days when enslaved people took the journey, the real journey to freedom. Let us give thanks for their lives and acknowledge how grateful we all are that we have received the gift of this music and the spirit from these people who sang it in pain and in hope. And now, humble in the memory of their courage and love, let us sing with all our hearts.
Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while run this race in vain. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Stand by me while I run this race. Stand by me while I run this race. Stand by me while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Search my heart while I run this race. Search my heart while I run this race. Search my heart while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain.
We extinguish our chalice flame now, but not the light of love which is in our hearts. Feel the warmth of our love as we listen now to this music, and we hope many of you can stay afterwards to talk with our speakers today.